What happens if January 1st comes around, 2027, and open, fair, and free elections have not happened? Will Canada de-recognize Palestinian statehood if they do not hold open, fair, and free elections in 2026?
Excellent question.
Mr. Leveque, Canada has recognized a state of Palestine in furtherance of a two-state solution. Does GAC have a map of the state of Palestine?
Yes.
Do you know if Canada had any direct contacts or direct negotiation on that, or that everything was through the international community?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
From the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Alexandri Leveque, Assistant Deputy Minister, Europe, Middle East and Arctic Branch. Rebecca Netley, Legal Advisor and Director General, International Law Bureau. Tara Carney, Director General, Humanitarian Assistance Bureau. And Hong Won-Yu, Director, Humanitarian Policy Division. Welcome to you all.
I'd like to preface my comments by reiterating that I think we are all here furiously advocating for peace between the State of Israel and the fundamentalist Islamist terrorist organization currently wreaking havoc in Gaza, as well as peace in the broader conflict between Israel and the recently recognized Palestinian state. Indeed, we believe a two-state solution with elected democratic bodies that respect the rights and freedoms of not just their own citizens, but especially each other's is absolutely paramount to achieve this. I do, however, have a couple questions on points of clarification on the government's decision to recognize Palestinian statehood at this particular juncture and around what that looks like from a Canadian perspective. To start, who does the Government of Canada recognize as the legitimate sovereign over the Gaza Strip, that being Area A, Area B, Area C, and East Jerusalem?
Thank you for the question and for the sentiments on the prospects for peace. I think the short answer to governance in Gaza is that it now suffers from an immense void. Hamas and its security forces, for lack of a better term, continue to control a portion of the Strip, and of course the Israeli Defense Forces occupy about the other half. There is very little governance. And the Government of Canada currently does not recognize Hamas as a legitimate governing authority. So the
if I may, who does the Government of Canada then recognize as the capital of the Palestinian state?
That is also a question of disagreement and reflection. Canada has traditionally not pronounced itself on this, and the position of the government is that this is something that should be decided on through consultations and negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis in the future.
Thank you. So moving on to conditions attached to the actual statehood recognition. In the statement where the Prime Minister recognized Palestinian statehood, he wrote, "The Palestinian Authority has provided direct commitments to Canada and the international community on much-needed reforms, including to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state." So my first question is, what specific direct commitments to Canada did the Palestinian Authority give?
All of the above. These commitments were made in writing by the President of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. Commitments to elections, commitments to reforms on governance, commitments on education reform, and a variety of legal reforms in the Palestinian Authority.
And did these fundamental reforms include guarantees for continued suspension of the Palestinian Authority's Martyr Fund, including any direct or indirect alternatives or attempts to rebrand?
Yes, absolutely, both explicitly and in practice, as we have seen already a number of progress being made in the transformation of those funds to turn it into a more, let's just say, universally recognized process of welfare support for certain families.
Okay, so for clarity, can you confirm that the call by the Prime Minister for demilitarization is for the entire Palestinian state, including the Palestinian Authority and any militant groups operating in their territory?
That was the predicate on which the decision was made, and that is indeed what the Prime Minister is expecting.
Are you aware of, are any deadlines imposed on the demilitarization of Palestinian by the Palestinian led in exchange for statehood recognition?
Pardon me, can you repeat the beginning of the question?
Were there any deadlines imposed for the demilitarization?
No strict deadlines were imposed, no.
Okay. Was any assessment done on their ability to demilitarize?
I would say that this is going to be a work in progress and something that will happen over time. And the assessment is that it can be done if there's a general push by the international community to keep our collective attention on the situation in Palestine, and the support, the reform programs and the support to governance in Palestine. As long as that is in place, then yes, the assessment is that it is possible.
Okay, so let's fast forward to January 1st of 2027. What happens if January 1st comes around, 2027, and open, fair, and free elections have not happened? Will Canada de-recognize Palestinian statehood if they do not hold open, fair, and free elections in 2026?
Excellent question. My understanding of the law and international law is that once a state is recognized, it cannot be unrecognized. This is a move, a decision that happens once, which means that after that, the government of Canada interacts with the government of Palestine as it would with any other country, which means that the levers at our disposal are as a country and as a diplomatic corps and foreign policy are the same as with any other country.
But did the government...
we're out of time, Madam. Next is Rob Oliphant.
I want to follow up on Ms. Kramp-Neumann's question and talk about the difference between recognizing a state and recognizing a government. And it is my understanding that Canada does not recognize governments ever, but we do recognize states. I just wanted to make sure that was clearly, I'm correct in understanding that.
That is correct.
So there's a state recognition. That means then that we recognize the authority of that state to participate in international fora, but that governments we may disagree with, as we do in many cases, say Venezuela, for instance.
That is correct. And I would say there is the process of recognition is a one-time thing. Process of normalization of relations that includes the full suite of tools, first of all, through the mutual recognition of embassies and ambassadors, privileges and immunities, diplomatic property, etc., is along the spectrum of normalization of relations.
And that would include then diplomatic relations. Eventually, it would include the borders and boundaries, eventually the capital, eventually. But this would be a normal process.
It is a very normal process, and I would say a number of other tools that exist to continue engaging, just like with any other country, whether it's MOUs, treaties, consultations, trade agreements, etc. These are all along the lines of the spectrum, if you will, of normalization between two countries, and we're still at the beginning of that process.
And two other areas of questioning. One is, we appear to be cautiously optimistic about the ceasefire holding. Is that a good characterization? And if so, how is Canada participating in reinforcing this ceasefire and peace agreement?
It is a good characterization. The ceasefire has had a few false starts already, but overall it is holding. I think it will require constant attention by global leaders in order to keep the pressure on all sides, really, for this to continue to hold. Canada is currently, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, represented in the center that is this civilian military coordination center that is U.S. led, that is based in Israel, just north of Gaza. Literally, it's a large building with several floors, and the Israeli Defense Forces are there, the international partners are there, the American military is there. and we are embedded through civilian and military presence in this group, in this cell, that is there to observe, document the daily occurrences of the ceasefire. The intention is to migrate from this to an international stabilization force. And as a matter of fact, just this morning, we learned that the United States was going to table in the UN Security Council a resolution to establish an ISF, an International Stabilization Force. This is a very positive development because this force could have been developed outside of UN confines. It could have been done as regional groupings, strictly U.S.-led. The fact that it is being introduced in the context of the UN Security Council is an indication of doubling down on multinational institutions, but also has a much higher likelihood of drawing the credibility, the legitimacy that the world is looking to, and will therefore also increase the likelihood of military contributions of a peacekeeping nature, or at least of an observation nature, to be from across the globe.
And we have ongoing conversations with the Palestinian Authority and are attempting to support them in their modernization, in their capacity to govern all of the new Palestinian state once we have a two-state solution. There are constraints that have been placed on the PA through forwarding of taxes and monies from Israel. Are we continuing to advocate that the PA has the resources that they should have to do the work that they need to do?
Very strongly, and Canada is not alone at doing this. A large number of partners, particularly European partners, continue to increase this pressure, these requests, because ultimately we collectively believe that it is fundamentally in Israel's interest in longer-term security to have a stable and secure, well-managed, well-governed Palestinian state, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. The way to do this is not by suffocating the governing authorities from any revenues. These are revenues on the basis of exports of goods coming out of the West Bank, and we think that it is legitimate for these to be collected by the current governing authority.
I'll just open the door on humanitarian assistance. We'll follow up with further questions on that. Canada's role, we are a significant contributor. My assumption is that will continue, and are there things that you should be asking us to ask our government for?
10-second response, please.
Thank you. And we can come back to it later. We will continue to follow the global appeals, the international appeals for humanitarian assistance. We have set aside significant amount of money right now, but we know the need is going to continue to be great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. This is an important topic of concern to my constituents, and I'm glad for the updates. I just have a quick a couple of quick yes or no questions for Mr. Leveque, and then I have some questions for Ms. Netley about international law. Mr. Leveque, Canada has recognized a state of Palestine in furtherance of a two-state solution. Does GAC have a map of the state of Palestine?
Yes.
Yes? Is that map publicly available?
We don't produce our own maps at Global Affairs. We use publicly available maps.
Because I'd really like a map of what, if you could please, I'd be grateful if you could send the committee a map of the state of Palestine.
I can assure you that Global Affairs has no map that isn't publicly available. But if I understand what you're trying to get at is exactly where we see the precise boundaries of what a state of Palestine would be. And the answer to that is not a yes/no, but it's a short one, is it will be up to Palestinians and Israelis to negotiate final status issues on the return of refugees.
So there is no
Jerusalem.
Actual map that Canada is using at this point. We're waiting to find out where it heads in negotiations.
Canada is not the entity that decides on the delineation of the border between Israel and Palestine, correct?
Okay, so, and Ms. Netley, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you about Prime Minister Carney's statement that he would arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu if he came to Canada under the ICC arrest warrant. Is it Canada's position that the ICC has jurisdiction, that the ICC had jurisdiction to issue that arrest warrant?
Thank you for the question. It's Canada's position. We're a strong supporter of the International Criminal Court, as you know, and the role that it plays in the fight against impunity. We consider the court to be an independent court.
So is that a yes?
Its judiciary is independent, and its prosecutors independent.
So yes, it is GAC's position that arrest warrant is valid.
Well,
I want to ask you about the principle of complementarity, which is a jurisdictional principle that dictates that the ICC can only step in to prosecute crimes and issue arrest warrants when a national legal system is either unwilling or unable to do so. So just a yes or no answer to this question. Is the Israeli court system currently operating?
Yes, it's currently operating.
And does that include the IDF military tribunals?
Yes, that would be part of what the ICC would look at in terms of evaluating complementarity.
Is the Supreme Court of Israel continuing to function in its capacity as both an appeals court and a judicial review body?
Yes, of course.
And does the Israeli government still have the capacity to hold elections?
Of course.
And are the basic state functions of policing, administration, and taxation still operating in the state of Israel?
Yes, they are certainly operating.
So I'm wondering, given the principle of complementarity, how does GAC and Canada justify its position that the ICC has jurisdiction here under the principle of complementarity?
Again, it's not for GAC to assess whether the arrest warrant was properly issued. We consider the International Criminal Court to be an independent and impartial tribunal, and we defer to it to make those decisions with respect to its own jurisdiction.
And do you think its decision that Israel is effectively a failed state for the purposes of the principle of complementarity, do you think the ICC's conclusion there is correct?
I would not say that ICC concluded that Israel was a failed state. I would say that the ICC concluded through its lens of the way in which it values, it interprets complementarity, that it did not see evidence that an investigation had been conducted. Again, we make no comment on that conclusion that it made. I just wanted to clarify how one might summarize the conclusion it had to draw prior to issuing or prior to making an application to its judicial bench for the issuance of an arrest warrant.
That Israel is not? Do you think that Israel is capable of being able to hold any of its officials to account in this context?
Well, it's not for me to comment on that, but I would say, based on the assessment of Israel as a democratic state, that yes, it is capable of doing so.
So did GAC advise the Prime Minister on the principle of complementarity in the context of the Prime Minister's statement about the arrest warrant?
We didn't advise the Prime Minister recently, but we have briefed officials up to the Minister's office and including the Prime Minister's office on complementarity and how that operates in the context of international criminal tribunals.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, we're out of time.
I believe it's been very clear. Canada has never drawn any equivalency between the State of Israel and Hamas, which is, as you've just said, Mr. Leveque, a terrorist organization. But we do, I think, recognize and acknowledge an equivalency between the people of Israel and the people of Palestine. And they're both of them share aspirations for peace and security. I also believe that Canada remains, and as you've articulated, been firmly committed to Israel's right to exist in peace and security. But we have also acknowledged and recognized that lasting peace requires a viable, stable Palestinian state that fully acknowledges Israel's inalienable right to security and peace. And so I think in the long term, you've spoken on this already, Mr. Leveque, at some length, but I'd ask perhaps, and you mentioned the UN Security Council resolution the Americans are bringing forward, and a number of significant next steps, but could you perhaps give us some insight on what Canada's role in supporting those multilateral efforts to stabilize the region, to prevent escalation, and to help secure that stable, viable peace and security that both Palestinian and Israeli people aspire to?
Thank you for the question and the opportunity to comment. I think, first of all, it is a recognized fact that this is one of the most protracted conflicts in the world. Some would say the longest lasting conflict that has ever been. I think it was important what you mentioned about there is no equivalency between the government of Israel, which is democratically elected, and a terrorist organization like Hamas, and I would never dispute that. But it is important to really zoom out and look at this from a much higher level, and look at what Canada has traditionally believed, fundamentally believed, which is that both these people deserve to live in peace and security. We have seen many efforts in the past, and we expend a lot of time and energy finding the voices inside Israel and inside Palestine for those that continue to seek this peaceful cohabitation. There's a lot of extremism. There's a lot of hate and a lot of mistrust right now. And it is part of what we see as our role to be the voice of reason that sees into the future and that tries to bring parties to the conflict where we believe their best interests will be served in the future. And enough voices exist in both Israel and Palestine to continue these efforts. Like I said before, Canada will and the department is working on options to provide to the ministers and Prime Minister on where we can be most helpful. We have areas of expertise. I mentioned demining before. I mentioned governance training and transfer of technical transfer of knowledge and democratic development, which means in this case the holding of elections in Palestine in a way that will legitimize future leadership for Palestinians. These are all areas that play to Canada's strength. It's not to say that we couldn't make a contribution elsewhere, but we each need to play to our strengths, and these are, in the first wave, the areas where we would consider making contributions, all, of course, subject to the level of ambition and decisions to be made by the Prime Minister and the Minister.
And thank you very much, Mr. Leveque. And if I may as well, I think the environment, as you said, has been a long and protracted and extremely complicated and difficult conflict for decades. But it's also occurring within a complicated environment in the neighborhood. And so I think Canada has some diplomatic relations with some of their neighbors, with Lebanon, with Jordan, with Egypt. And I wondered if you might speculate on how, through our diplomatic relationships, we might be able to continue to advance the cooperation of the regional partners.
Absolutely, and you're correct that nothing can be in the Middle East can be seen in isolation. We see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as the very center, the nucleus of what radiates throughout the region. When Palestinians suffer and are internally displaced or become refugees, they go to neighboring countries, which decreases stability for Jordan in particular, Lebanon in particular, and of course Egypt. So there's a reason why these countries are absolutely central to coming up with a plan for a lasting peace in the region, and there's a reason why they are the ones that are the most intimately involved, along with the United States at the negotiating table.
Thank you. I think will be important if we can get some history about the Canadian aid to the Palestinian authorities for the last decade. If you have any briefing or you can supply us with those numbers, will be great.
Thank you for the question. It is indeed a long association that goes back to the Oslo Accord of over 30 years ago. So maybe if it's helpful to the committee, we could share some background on this. But ever since, Canada has been deeply involved in a number of key sectors of governance, particularly the legal system, transparency in the service that is delivered to citizens in the West Bank. There's been a little bit of infrastructure, a little bit of technical assistance, and a little bit of civic and democratic development, as well as many programs that encourage private sector development. So a lot of training, technical assistance, transferring of knowledge that has taken place literally over 2-3 decades.
The Prime Minister said that Canada would redouble its efforts to support the Palestinian Authority and to support the government in Palestine and contribute to a peaceful and promising future for its people. The conditions of what does redoubling mean? Is it on resources, whether financial resources, human resources? Is it on assisting in bringing democratic reform of some kind? Have Canada been asked to participate in such effort? I think we have a long-standing experience and history in being able to do that, and I think will be important. So I'm not sure if you know if Canada was asked in specific to play this role, and what else is Canada's commitment looks like in order to assist in the commitment being made originally.
Thank you. The short answer is yes. Canada has been asked. The flip side of that answer is this is an absolutely unique moment in time that if it is to be successful and if the ceasefire is to lead to a consolidation, stabilization, eventually reconstruction, and most important of all, the ability for two peoples to coexist, to cohabit side by side in safety and security, it is going to require sustained dedication, sustained attention, and of course sustained resources. Decisions have not yet been made on the level of resources nor the type of assistance that we could provide. Latest assessments I have read on just the reconstruction needs of Gaza are in the $65 billion range. So obviously this is not something that governments alone, no development assistance alone is going to be able to deliver on this. It is going to have to require drawing in the private sector and of course sovereign wealth fund donations and et cetera, et cetera. Where Canada will play a role is, first of all, in where the need is greatest, but first of all, in the consolidation of these essential institutions, be it particularly on transparency, rule of law, and democratic governance. And that starts with elections that should happen in the next
Prime Minister
year.
attended the peace conference or peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And do you know, or can you tell us if by any chance that Canada has direct, or the Prime Minister have direct sort of negotiation or talk to the Palestinian Authority, or the commitment he made and the plan is within the international community effort? Because it's very important to know that in order to have the Gaza ruled by the Palestinian authorities, there's complete disagreement between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and how this is going to be navigated, how this is going to be sorted out in order to allow that to happen. Do you know if Canada had any direct contacts or direct negotiation on that, or that everything was through the international community?
Very brief response. We're out of time.
So I can absolutely confirm that the Prime Minister has been in touch directly with the President of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, on several occasions, both in orally and in writing. Yes, the Prime Minister was involved in those early discussions in Sharm el-Sheikh that determined the early steps of this peace plan. And I can say that the countries that are, we do not engage with Hamas. We have absolutely no contact, strict policy, because it is a terrorist organization under the criminal code in Canada. But we do deal through some of our partners like Egypt, like Qatar, like Turkey, that do communicate directly with the Palestinian factions and do try to bring about a a resolution of the conflicts between the different factions.
Prime Minister Carney was invited to Sharm el-Sheikh. That's, I think, important. Canada has always been on the international stage as a peace element and endorser. But prior to that, the position or the relationship with the U.S. wasn't on the same alignment with regard to this conflict. Am I correct?
I mean, I would say we share the same objectives, fundamentally, which is to bring peace between Israelis and Palestinians. How we go about it, there's been some differences of views in terms of which foreign policy tools to use, but we share fundamentally the same objectives.
So United States initiated the invitation because it was led by President Trump. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did the U.S. ask Canada to play a specific role in this whole thing? Do you recall any conversation on that? Are you aware of?
As far as I'm aware, the invitation was made in recognition for Canada's long-standing and traditional role to be a helpful peace broker in the region, but that no specific contribution was requested of the Prime Minister as part of that summit participation.
So the Palestinian Authority, after the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, have been in contact with Canada more actively than before?
I would say not necessarily more actively. I mean, we do have a diplomatic mission that is based in Ramallah and a representative, a Canadian representative to the Palestinian Authority. So these Palestinian Authority officials are the daily contacts that our diplomatic staff based in Ramallah meet with. There's a particular interest on the next phases of the peace plan right now, and that's what a lot of the focus is on. There's a particular interest on our part in discussing the implementation of the commitments that the Palestinian Authority has made to the Prime Minister. But I would say we've maintained very good working level relationship with Palestinian Authority officials, and there's been no major difference, maybe just on the topics and the focus, the areas of focus in the last few weeks.
Our mission in Ramallah made of how many people, do you know?
I would need to give you the specific numbers. I would need to come back to the committee, but I would say Canada-based staff would be in the, I want to say 15, 16, and then a few dozen locally engaged staff.
So is there a plan to increase or basically support the mission further, because now Gaza also is under the authority of the same mission?
Very brief response.
The current assessment is that we are staffed adequately in our mission based in Ramallah.
Thank you very much.
I'm interested in what comes next in terms of governance and democracy. And there are international examples of places where under UN Security Council resolutions, there were international multilateral authorities that had executive and legislative power, while alongside building capacity of provisional institutions of self-governance in those places. I'm thinking of East Timor, Kosovo. Canada and Canadians have been very involved in helping to build the peace, the governance structures. We have a tremendous amount of expertise amongst Canada, but also of Canadians who are doing this in multilateral institutions. I wonder if you could tell us what role you think that Canadian democracy and governance practitioners might be able to play in a future building of those kinds of democratic structures in Gaza and Palestine.
Thank you. That is indeed the billion-dollar question right now. I think given where we're starting from, it's important to really look at small steps that first stabilize the ceasefire, then start building the trust in very incremental ways. And that, like I said, right now, the only mission that exists is one of oversight, supervision, observation of a ceasefire, not a peace plan per se. So the next really important step will be this international stabilization force that could actually see, depending on how the UN Security Council resolution is drafted, international troops or troops provided by a number of countries enter Gaza and actually serve as a security force, while Palestinian transfer to the proper authority among Palestinians of the monopoly of force and policing can be transferred. It means that in the meantime, we have a lot of work to do to professionalize, to increase the number of Palestinian security forces that would have the ability to play that role. This is a space where Canada actually has done a lot through the Office of Security Coordinator in Jerusalem. Op Proteus, one of the Canadian Armed Forces operations, has had the deputy command of this operation, which is a mix of military and civilian, and they have done a lot of training among both civilian and not military, but Palestinian security forces. So there's a good basis from which to start there. It would need to be brought up to scale, and for that for that ISF, the International Stabilization Force, to first take hold, to be able to then train Palestinian security forces and then bring them into Gaza. Those are the next steps before we can even talk about developing proper governance in Gaza.